I don't live in either my past or my future. I'm interested only in the present. If you can concentrate always on the present, you'll be a happy man. Life will be a party for you, a grand festival, because life is the moment we're living now. Paulo Coelho. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast, back on home turf. That's right, first episode recording back in the United States after a weeks-long trip in Nuremberg, Germany. Talked well enough about that in the last episode, but got home right away, immediately enjoyed some air conditioning, normal toilets, and touched all of my guns, put them all out in the sun, like, recharging my crystals, and whatnot. But as I was actually driving home from the airport, after getting jerked around by customs and all that and waiting in lines that were way too long, I had a thought. And actually, it was a thought that I was able to reflect on it more after listening to the latest Art and War podcast with Forrest from the Redacted Culture cast. And that thought was the consequences, or rather, the difference in consequences that normal civilians are forced to sort of be subjected to versus the consequences that our representatives are subject to. And it's like common knowledge by now that government is sort of this beast that can write and rewrite and interpret their own laws however and whenever they want. They can partake in insider trading, statutory rape, dissemination of child porn, the inciting of riots, etc., etc. And whenever loyalty begins to falter in a base, whether it be red or blue, abortion and guns are threatened or taken away to stir up votes and support, and you likely had zero say in any of that, i.e. the brace ruling, i.e. SCOTUS decides to just circle up one day and undo Roe v. Wade, in my opinion, about both of those and how they are more similar than dissimilar, is well documented by now, executive orders, etc. Doesn't matter. And should the financial incentives be high enough, your tax dollars will be invested in war efforts we have zero business being involved in. Actually, your tax dollars are a mere drop in the bucket. As we all know, our deficit continues to grow more and more each day, and it seems like more stopgap bills are sort of forced through to keep the government running, and somehow more money gets funneled to Ukraine and Israel each and every time. I'm not really sure how that contributes to our government being able to function with the amount of debt that they do, but again, they get to interpret that however they see fit, all while ignoring Hawaii, all while ignoring the border crisis, while also providing free sex changes for the illegal immigrants coming over, and ignoring our failed cities like Flint, still in need of clean water, Chicago, already suffering from a record number of gun deaths, I believe, in 2024, as early as it is, and then the entire states of California and New York. And I always just believed this was sort of inevitable. It was the nature of government, if you will. Maybe it's just the way that people are. Maybe it's just the natural course that governments take, but it's undeniable that the way that our representatives are chosen to serve in this country does not leave us with the most qualified candidates, let's just say. And I've already elaborated on this point in prior episodes. Therefore, since we are only left with the scum of the earth, of course they would take full advantage of their power to better only themselves, using the resources that are supposed to be allocated for our safekeeping and our well-being of the natural rights we were all given as human beings. They've since actually taken those resources and used them to build a moat, if you will, around themselves so that they can take all that they want from us and this world without any sort of resistance. Excuse me. And while I do believe that this theory that I just spoke of holds true, I think we can break it down, and the thought I had on a car ride from the airport, I think we can break that down even further to get to a deeper root, for lack of a better word, if you will. And that root or the vein being the consequences, or again, like I mentioned earlier, the difference in the consequences that we are subjected to versus our representatives. And you see, when something bad happens, say, in recent history, a solar flare or a pandemic, an invasion on our southern border, a war, natural disaster, whatever you want to call it. Gross negligence like planes falling out of the sky or trains derailing also count for this as well. The consequences are representatives face merely threaten, or the consequences that they face are a decrease in or a complete abandonment of the faith that we, the people, the voters, have in the system or in them. In other words, that's the only thing that they're concerned with when something terrible or something bad or negative happens in the real world. And for normal people, like you and I, the consequences are much more severe. We face death, illness, financial ruin, and victimhood. We do not get the privilege of flying in their private jets, having access to medical procedures outside of the mandated sort of big pharma kickback machine that they accept all the money from. And more simply, we lack the privilege, red freedom, to disregard the very rules and regulations that they set and can disregard whenever they see fit. When we decide they have put us in harm's way or at a potential disadvantage. So in short, they do because they feel they can. They do so because they feel they can without any repercussions. And this is where I took this thought, this is where it sort of reached its conclusion while I was driving, because again, I was driving and it's not that long of a drive. However, when I got to work the next day, I listened to the latest Art and War podcast, like I mentioned a little earlier. And that's when the phrase or term names and addresses sort of came into the mix, the melting pot, of this idea, if you will. And oversimplifying, when discussing words and their meanings, or rather their lack of meaning, given how terms are now constantly misused, Forrest from the Redacted Culture Cast stated that, and I am paraphrasing here, a conspiracy is no more once we know who was involved and where they live. In other words, names and addresses. So, and warning, the Scoville level's gonna sort of crank up a little bit here, but the bridge that sort of bridges the gap between our consequences and our representatives' consequences closes much more, indeed, when names and addresses of all of those involved is made and easily made available. And leaning on the French farmers, again, for a relatively civil example for where this could go, they just showed up to politicians' place of work, not their homes, which is generous, and painted them with manure. Their demands were met after literally shitting on their government for a long enough time. And framing this a little bit differently, imagine the governor of New York declares that you must house an illegal immigrant, or that the school your children attend must also accommodate unhoused illegals in their gymnasium. What if something horrific transpired and your family, your child, was victimized by the illegal alien or aliens forced into your home or under the same roof your child occupies for most of the day? Now, would Kathy Hochul, who resides at 138 Eagle Street in Albany, New York, previously living in a $485,000 two-story condo in Bumpus, Virginia on Lake Anna, put you and your family in danger, knowing that she can be nose-to-nose with you and real-world consequences for her perceived negligence? She may still be stupid enough, but if she at least doesn't think twice, evolution will eventually catch up to her and people like her pretending to serve us. Now, winding it down a little bit here, this, of course, is somewhat of a simplified theory. Laid out, nothing takes place in a vacuum in the real world, as we all know. Human problems are messy problems. They're not black and white. they're gray, and one magic bullet, one potion, whatever it is, isn't going to solve everything, isn't going to be the one-way highway to utopia. There are many other variables at play that may keep the playing fields uneven when we're talking about consequences in us versus them. And I think the primary example, again, using recent examples here, the Epstein Black Book and the court files. We literally got names, addresses, and as a treat, contact information of those involved. And we truly do know certain ones who were involved when cross-referencing all of the documents and resources that were made available to us. And sort of the point I want to drive home here with names, addresses, and consequences is that those who are supposed to serve us operate behind somewhat of a veil in which they are not accountable for their actions. And whether that's because of how obscure and how difficult it is to understand how even the most what should be simple things in our government work, like proposing and voting on and implementing laws and just voting for representatives in general and who's allowed to run and who's appointed and how that whole bullshit works doesn't matter. There's sort of this veil that separates them and us, and it makes it extremely difficult to understand who specifically to who specifically to hold accountable when things are suboptimal or we have concerns or questions or comments. And again, like I mentioned earlier, they have turned those very resources that are supposed to exist for our safety and the safeguarding of our rights into the very border that, quite frankly, we desire for our own country. But instead, they've built this border, this wall up to surround themselves, ensuring that they are untouchable should the people, we the people, determine they are no longer fit to serve. An equality of consequences is what we should be striving for. Holding them to the same standards is not nearly enough at this point. And again, we are all dealing with the scum of the earth here as our representatives. Not a single one of these people have accomplished anything in their lives or have a resume that would hold up even in a fast food restaurant or any sort of mediocre business, let alone running the greatest country that has ever been. Period. The people bred simply to win the world's least transparent popularity contests by promising the greatest financial payout to government stakeholders at every voter's expense are the very people running the show and who we are subjected to. Now, when talking about heavier topics or ugly topics, I like to try to bring it back to somewhat of a positive or a hopeful note. And if there is a positive example to reference here, I would say to keep looking to the farmers in the EU and no longer just the French or the Germans. There are others, I believe the Belgians and maybe another country that has now joined them in a similar sort of farm equipment flooding the streets and participating in civil or not so civil disobedience. But they're tearing down police barricades and plowing through them and spraying shit on government buildings, as we've seen in the videos. And that's how they're making their votes heard once the avenues for recourse provided by their government are proven to be inadequate. And a spicier example on top of sort of the farmer protests I would point to is what's happening in Ireland that is not getting nearly enough coverage. The illegal immigrant that slaughtered the little girl, stabbed her I don't know how many times, or I'll pull up the headline without giving that animal too much credit here. Ireland's been rioting. They've been burning shit down. Hotels that house these people, they've been letting cop cars on fire. They are rioting because they are subjected to the consequences of the ignorance of their representatives, and they have no valid recourse. And the consequences for the Irish people are the death of their children, the death of their child in this one specific situation. But seeing the crime headlines here in the US as our border has been opened, as our immigration policies have been more and more laxed, our consequences appear very similar as that one college student unfortunately had to find out on our own soil here. And again, our consequences are our people, our children, our brothers, our sisters, our family, our fellow man. And I've been over what makes a man and what doesn't, and how you lose your right to your natural rights. The animals that are committing the atrocities in Ireland over here, they do not possess the same God-given natural rights we do, when they decide the prize, the target, when they decide that your natural rights no longer matter and they can prey upon you however they wish. Those are not people, those are animals. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter your skin color, doesn't matter who you sleep with, who you worship, what you eat, what you drive, what your stance is on whether the earth is flat or not. That one may be debatable, I understand, but you're an animal. Simple as that. We are, again, sorry I went on a tangent there, the consequences for us, we are subjected to violence, victimhood, death, like I mentioned earlier, and the death of our family members, our fellow man. The consequences for our representatives are nowhere near that. They are held up in high castles with high walls, where laws and law enforcement, via the monopoly on violence, which I've spoken of, keep them very isolated from their own ignorance and our displeasure when we decide that a ballot box isn't enough to voice our displeasure, or social media isn't enough to voice our displeasure. The worst that could happen for them is they get thrown out of their office, and maybe in very rare circumstances, they get imprisoned. And again, we haven't really killed a politician. And when I say we, I mean we the people. It's mostly been the CIA, their own people, from what I understand and what we're finding out more and more. So putting that down as a consequence really no longer seems valid or fathomable. So the highest level of punishment that these people can possibly receive is imprisonment, but more realistically, losing their mainstream of income or their power. But they're really in it for the money. Let's not make any sort of misconception that they're power hungry people. I think they're money hungry whores. That's all that they are. I don't think they have the complex or the brain big enough to support a power complex that would be giving them way too much credit. So yeah, consequences, names, and addresses. Reflect on that as long as you want. I did make note, and again, trying to wrap it up and not as much of a heavy note towards the end of this shorter first solo episode back. I was at work today, catching up still from being out for a week, and snagged some pretty hilarious headlines. The first one, Jesus Christ. First one being, can you blame boomers for the housing market and inventory shortage? And this is by Bloomberg, and I believe it is an opinion piece. But nearly 40% of Americans born between 1946 and 1964 have lived in the same home and have owned it for at least 20 years, and that's contributing to the lack of available properties, is what they're saying. Pretty goddamn hilarious. And what a statist piece of shit who wrote that. Yeah, blame the people who bought and invested in the house and made the house their own home. Fuck them. They are the entire reason why you can't own a house, and that's entirely on them. It's totally not the government's fault for completely fucking up the global economy because of the Wuhan flu for 3 to 4 plus years. No, surely not the entire global supply chain, financial system, and the entire way we have ever operated getting completely flipped on its head had anything to do with that. Especially if you listen to the last episode, learning how certain areas in Germany getting leveled during the war, not recovering as quick as others, have led it to become, still to this day, a very unpleasant place to be and a home mostly simply for refugees of war in other countries. So, butterfly effect seems to be very real in these cases. So surely the government's actions had nothing to do with it. It's simply the people who bought the houses, invested in the houses, and lived in the houses their entire life. They're the problem why you can't own a house, and you should be mad at your fellow man, not the people who completely have total control over the financial system. Good one. The other one, and this one is lighter, I promise. I'm sitting at work today. I couldn't believe my eyes. There's another one too I want to touch on after this, because I think it's very interesting. But apparently Kellogg started running a cereal for dinner like campaign, I guess, if you will, or maybe it was said in jest. I have the article here. Kellogg CEO Gary has been drawing a lot of comparisons to Marie Antoinette, with Americans spending more on food than they have in 3 decades. Gary highlighted a Kellogg campaign promoting cereal for dinner, telling CNBC the message was landing really well. It has since promoted social media users, or simply it has Jesus. It has since prompted social media users and news outlets to invoke the French monarch and her starving subjects. Let them eat cornflakes. Consumers are taking issue with this assertion that cereal is affordable or desirable for an evening meal. I swear the ghost of John Harvey Kellogg is here in this room with us right now. What the fuck? What a tone deaf fucking thing. This is no different than the people flying in on jets to the World Economic Forum and telling you to eat bugs, or that you're the reason why the planet is dying. You'll eat bugs and be happy. You'll own nothing and be happy. Maybe just cereal. You'll eat cereal and be happy is simply the gateway drug for the rest of the agenda. I don't know. But yeah, everything's expensive. Just eat cereal. That's fine. After we've already learned that the whole red meat is bad for your heart thing was a total scam, and that it's really sugar and seed oils and all this other crap. Yeah, go eat that cereal right before bed. At night, and a big meal too, because it's got to be dinner, right? Cereal for dinner. That'll do you good. That's a really wise idea, Gary. And the last one, and I don't know if I still have it available here, but it essentially, I would love to know who's. I mean, I already know who's pushing this. Doesn't take a genius to surmise where this is coming from. But it was an article about how Ozempic is basically going to keep the economy afloat. And that I find extremely scary. See, we know the diabetes drug is now being pushed as this weight loss thing because, again, eat cereal for dinner, I guess, and breakfast. Why not have, both as a treat? Don't eat, real stuff that actually comes from the earth. Don't move around. Don't lift heavy things. It's just jab yourself with this thing and then lose bone density and muscle and connective tissue. Because you'll be skinny, and that's the goal. That's natural. That's how you should operate. But it's no secret that the drug is a big winner because it cures obesity, which is a crisis, and it's racking in the dollars for its makers. And so it's basically an article raving about how if America just keeps spending the way that they are, along with this drug, it's basically going to keep the economy rolling and maybe even avoid a recession, I believe is what it said. Hopefully I can pull it up. But what a time we live in, man, huh? That's fucking crazy. And actually, as I was scrolling through my Instagram the other day, I came across another podcast that had shown that there's already a class action lawsuit that is going out for the users of Ozempic that were prescribed it for weight loss. And that stuff usually takes 10 years or so to really build up a case and build up evidence and proof that that's what's causing it. But it's already out now. So maybe we don't have to wait for the science to catch up with us this time. Maybe we were just right and we're going to be proven right. They'll never tell you you're right, though. They still hardly have since the Wuhan flu has passed. But I thought those were some funny articles as I wrapped up the day here. Let's see what's on the agenda. I will be flying out in a couple days here. Yes, back on a plane again. This one is a family trip, though. It is not a trip to Germany that I paid for. I'm lucky enough to be able to still go on vacations with my family. We're going to go out west to Durango, Colorado. And I'm a snowboarder. Have my family skis, have snowboards. So we're going to go hit the slopes. We did it again. We did it last year, so we're going to do it again this year. I'm hoping to film on location. I'm going to bring all of my little portable setup to get an episode in because the views are just incredible. I'd love to be able to film on a mountain or something. I think, why not? That'd be cool. So yeah, shorter episode here. I still have to do some laundry to continue the packing effort. But looking forward to getting out there, being outside some more. It's always nice, even in these cold, shitty days. But that's really what is up. And I'll end it on this. Everywhere I turn, whether it be podcasts, hosted by comedians, whether it be serious podcasts, whether it just be the random Instagram reel or post. Everyone's saying 2024 is supposed to be like the year where shit like kicks off. And that's hard to deny. Things have only been boiling and sort of coming to a head more and more. And whether that is simply whatever you try to chalk that up to, whether it be the algorithm trying to spin everything up, whether it just be the availability of information and the speed at which it spreads now, whatever it is. I cannot deny that, yes, the temperature level appears to only be rising, and nothing really seems to be changing that, even as states begin to vote on who their nominees are going to be for both sides, especially with two high-level conflicts we are involved in right now taking place. And the N option, the N word, the nuclear word, very much sort of floating around up there, wherever it is, as we are involved in these conflicts, is also a thing too. Solar flares, other diseases, everything. It seems to just keep piling on and not stopping. And we have this whole backdrop of an election coming up this year as well. It's easy to spiral, extremely easy to spiral, given everything that is happening and everything that's about to happen. However, I don't think saying it's going to come to a head and saying this is it, something's really going to go down this year, is the right way to go about it or to think about it. I think, and I see little signs every day of people coming back to reality, or people pushing back on a lot of the nonsense that is only contributing to the temperature rising, to the pot boiling over, if you will. The farmer protest, again, not to continue beating this dead horse over again, being a huge one. It was a big, and I wouldn't call it a mostly peaceful protest, but they won. They pushed back enough, and the bullshit that was going to absolutely cripple a company's food supply got completely dismantled because of it. One example. I know a lot is going on here in the US, similar to what they were pushing back over there, also with the context of the border crisis. And I think the people that we are left to push back against, the scum of the earth, the people who won the least transparent popularity contest, aren't strong people, or people with backbones or conviction, if you will. The empowered individuals, and truly empowered through being morally strong and sound individuals, let's just say, are going to be able to get their way. And thankfully and hopefully, their way is as morally sound as they are. And I think the thing that really sort of gives me hope is, as I hear some people talk about things, as I see things getting pushed back and that pushback sort of panning out in ways, they're little beacons of hope that sort of remind me, okay, things are boiling over, but people find ways to drop like ice cubes, if you will, into the water, into the pot. And yes, they're small, but it does contribute to a lowering of the temperature. And I do think, because of the internet, because of the speed in which information is made available and the breadth of the information made available, and the good people who are using the internet for good, are only helping sort of spread that. You see more podcasts, you see more reels, and I guess it's totally dependent upon your algorithm and what you follow. But me personally, someone who never saw this stuff, is seeing it much more now in the past 2 years, of people talking about morals. What is right? What is good? Objectively, what a healthy, good, and just right lifestyle means. What real facts and what real science are, and that's continuing to grow. And I do think it's continuing to grow, not only because people have had enough, that they are fired up, that they are pissed off, that they're at their wits' end. I do think that is a good percentage of it. But I think we are now starting to see where the end, or what the end of the road looks like logistically, of the path that we're on now. The trend of transgender mass shooters seems to be playing out pretty consistently. at this point. To provide one example, the trend of gun control being just a monument of every failure of government. Shout out Chicago. And other little things similar to that. And I got into a little bit of a debate about these used to be great cities, the New York subway. Oh, it was okay. That just reminded me. But yes, New York with their subway, their stupid laws about, you saw the illegals kicking the cops and then, giving the Tupac as he just turned right around, didn't see any jail time. There was an Amazon to pile on to the New York stories because fuck that dumb fucking state and city. An Amazon driver was attacked by a naked, intoxicated, masturbating man. And in his only defense, the man was trying to take packages from the driver. I don't remember if the man was an illegal alien. I'm pretty sure he was. Um, the driver, in self-defense, began throwing like ice from the ground, snow from the ground to try to deter this insane animal away from him. Luckily, I don't know, someone called it in or a cop happened to be by and see it, but cop came in, broke it up, split them apart, arrested both of them. The Amazon driver was actually fucking charged with, I don't know if it was a more severe crime, an equally severe crime, or doesn't matter. He was actually charged with some sort of assault charge. I'll pull it up again because he defended himself from this insane naked man who was masturbating in the street where it's cold enough for there to be ice for the driver to throw. That's fucking crazy. Fuck that place. But yeah, so like I got into a little bit debate with my parents about, it's such a shame to see these cities, go to where they are. San Fran or all of California, fuck it. Chicago, New York. It is the best thing that can happen for these states. There's a very clear trend in the leadership there. Or the level of incompetent leadership there, I think, is the best way to state it. And it is no coincidence. It is no miracle. It is no act of secret racial privilege of some overlord ruling class that is keeping these cities and states down. It's a pretty clear finger, or a pretty clear direction in which we can point our fingers and say, yeah, that's where the problem is. That's the cancer that needs to be cut out. And that sort of gives me hope in a way because it's so consistent. It's so clear cut across the board. And they're just so similar that it is only logical for people to pick up on a trend eventually. Now, you have to cut through a lot of noise and a lot of bullshit like news, fake news, fake social media, censorship, and whatnot. Oh, by the way, I got a bone to pick about that too. To sort of come to the conclusion that, okay, this shit isn't working out. And furthermore, I had to then overcome my own emotional attachment because I identify with X, so therefore nothing can be wrong with it. And then got to cut through all the noise, all the fake news, fake social media, the censorship, to come to the conclusion that there's a pattern beginning to emerge that is harmful and hurtful to me or other people. But it is the only logical end of the road, of the path that those states, those cities, and we are on. And that gives me hope. I can only hope, though, on top of the hope that's been given to me, that we come, or people in mass come to the same conclusion that we have sooner rather than later, so we do not reach the end of the road, the end of the tracks, and we cannot bail or stop the train. Back to censorship, though. Someone at Meta got promoted or was told their job is on the chopping block because a whole new fresh batch of posts have been highlighted and tagged as not following their community guidelines because safety. Didn't give a fuck about safety. Remember, they're the reason why so many kids and teenagers kill themselves. They also help contribute to human trafficking. And oh yeah, now I'm at work flipping through Instagram, my Discover page on my break, and I actually see tits, just straight up full frontal nudity. How? I learned that's okay now. There's some breastfeeding loophole that OnlyFans people are taking advantage of. And so now I can see full frontal nudity, but I know people who cannot post Nerf guns. I also cannot post a picture of pants. In the new wave of posts of mine that got flagged and prevented my account from being shared with others or shared on the Discover page, a picture of pants violated their weapons policy. Consequences, ladies and gentlemen, those consequences will come home, I promise you. Fuck, that gets me so upset. To be more specific, the picture that got flagged was a picture taken of Cry G3 combat pants next to the Amazon sort of knockoff under night vision. We were doing a comparison to see how they look, under nods, just to further, just to add some extra level of comparison between the $300 pants versus the $30 pants. Turns out, after some digging and some talking with some people in the group chat, the word airsoft. So in the post, the caption, I said Cries versus Amazon airsoft special. What's your money on? The word airsoft now, just the word in the caption of a post, violates their weapons policy. In other words, airsoft is synonymous with gun, kill, murder, rape, drug, whatever it is. The word airsoft is synonymous to those other words, violates their weapons policy, and is unsafe for the community. Yet, if I am an underage child, I can log on to Facebook and see full frontal nudity. I can be driven to kill myself and or be human trafficked. Those Nazis don't give a fuck about safety. Fuck them. So yeah, I won't go down that anymore because boy, that gets me so fucking irked. Yeah, I think I'm going to call it there though, because I can continue rambling on and on. Consequences, names, and addresses. I'm not saying you're going to be able to look up addresses associated with the names of those you voted or most likely didn't vote for. That's by design. Remember, they built those moats to keep themselves safe from you and the consequences of their actions. But strive, push for those equal consequences whenever you can. And I need to do a better job at not being so black-pilled. See, in the same episode that Forrest was on Art and War, he, brought up some very interesting points against anarchism, actually, and how decentralization, disenfranchisement, whatever you like to call it, can be achieved without anarchism in a more realistic manner, I believe, for how humans sort of operate. See, I have no misconception that anarchism and the type of peaceful, sort of moral anarchism that people like myself and others in the community sort of hold is idealistic. It's never been tested. It's simply theoretical. But to us, we can rationalize it, and it makes sense because we're good people. We return the shopping carts to the cart corral. He said we can get to his theory was, or his point was, and again, I'm paraphrasing because I listened to it a couple days ago now, we can get to that decentralization if the right people get involved and enough people make their voices heard and take action. That, to me, feels like it's a little too much faith in the system. However, I like that it... And I'm still playing with a lot of this in my head and coming to terms with it. I don't have a definitive action point or takeaway for myself other than inserting myself into my immediate community's happenings, if you will. Town hall meetings, budget meetings, and whatnot. And yeah, they don't do a real good job at making that public knowledge and easy to know when and where those are going down. Excuse me. So something I'm going to have to put more effort in than I should as someone who pays taxes to this fucking city. But something I'm going to do. You see Brandon Herrera getting involved in his little community. That's much more larger scale than just going to the meetings and voicing your opinion. But I am playing around and thinking about doing that. Getting some of the fellows together, making it known that we are very much here and we are very much a loud voice because we fucking care. And we're not like them. And trust me, we represent more of the people here than any of them do. I think that's something that we need to be doing. I'm not really sure what that looks like other than just going to these little, town hall meetings, the school meetings, the budget meetings, whatever it may be. And doing that right is going to take some trial and error, but I like how inserting yourself or yourselves and pushing and appointing the right people, as convoluted and as hard to fucking understand as that is in this goddamn country, is a noble thing. I think it's a morally right thing. That's tricky because part of me also thinks that voting in today's state isn't morally, I don't know. I feel morally obligated not to vote given where we are today and what's on the ballot today. And also seeing how little it seems to have mattered. That's my 2 cents, though. Doesn't mean that you should believe that. It's my beliefs. I like to think, I have convictions, things I won't budge on, natural rights, just facts, science, stuff like that. When it comes to things like, just my political belief, my political sort of identification, that's all very fluid. That can change because the world changes and it's a human problem. And human problems are gray and they're ugly and they're nasty. They're never black and white. So I'll never be I'm strictly this, just like the forever Democrats and Republicans, the dinosaurs in fucking office. That's not who I'll ever be. And so if I need to change how I approach the political topic, I will do so. And that's currently very fluid at the moment, unlike gender. So I'm still toying with that. I'd be happy to continue to talk it out with more of you guys in chats, in person, as we get more idiots together and do cool things. But I thought that was interesting and something I'll definitely reflect on more because that makes me no different than the people saying 2024 is going to kick off because I just need to shoot somebody. The world's crazy. Come and fucking get it. I'm ready to take what's mine, from you. I don't like that. And you shouldn't like that either because that's not, I don't know. I don't think that's right. So still playing around with that. Something to consider for you. I am actually going to finally shut up now. I just rambled for 20 more minutes longer than I needed to. But until next week, I'll be on site in Colorado. Stay safe. Stay metal. Thank you.